Okay, so we're talking about today kind of kicking off starting the design process on a game. And I've talked about this a few times, but just kind of want to keep approaching it because I think of it in different ways. So first, I'm not a paper prototyper. Uh, it is just simply I don't think that valuable to do because everything sounds great in your head. You want to have it touch the road as soon as you can so that you can see what actually works and what doesn't, right? And so with that, though, I step back and I think, well, again, I talk about it a lot. Tom Clancy Wildlands I really like as a game, but I can't make that. I can't make all of that stuff. A small team can't make that. Like you need a big team to make a game like that, even just using all the resources off of Marketplace. Uh, but okay, so that's an interesting though. I like a lot of flavor of that, and I can do a lot of flavor of that. I just can't, do something that large, so I can't do that. But I do writing and comedy stuff. I do some other design stuff that I think works pretty well. So okay, that's what I can bring that other people can't. Everybody has something, right? It could be the beautiful art, or it could be beautiful animations. I think a lot of those times we see there's a trap where we see those get posted up on Twitter or TikTok, and you're like, oh, then you get to the game and you're like, oh, there's not much of a game here. So I kind of think of game first and don't worry about how it looks. It's easy for me because I can't make it look nice. Uh, yeah, I appreciate teams that have that mixed group with them. Like we have talented artists I've worked with, but like just having that wholly full cloth new look. I mean, I think the Anacrusis was successful in looking distinct. And you can say it was just the wrong look. That's fine, but I think we did do that. That you kind of knew what we were when you saw us. That was good. But where I think we got in trouble with the Anacrusis. No, the Anacrusis, I'm happy where it is. It's playable. You can play it now. In fact, we're on sale. It's $5. I mean, come on, for $5, how mad are you going to get at me? Give it a shot. You can play it single player if you can't find players, or we do versus modes and other games in our Discord all the time. And you occasionally find people online. But I'm not going to try to lie to you and tell you there's a million people online and you can do nothing but find games every single day. That's just not going to be true, right? But it's doing well enough. But with that, I took the idea of, hey, I know this stuff really well, and I want to expand on it and go explore these other things that we couldn't do. The problem we ran into was we ended up replicating a lot of stuff and not expanding out that much. There are a bunch of new ideas and things in there, but we didn't get to take it to the level that I would like. Also have just the problem of when you're not a game everybody cares about, how you do things becomes less interesting, if that makes sense. So like I am jealous of the Helldivers 2 people, like how they're leaking out stuff and it's just kind of doing that. We actually have a system that 10% of the people will see this for the redacted. Like that's how we leaked it out, but nobody cared as much because we didn't have 50 million people playing the game. So you got to think a little bit differently when you have smaller numbers and how you can do things. But so for me, it's taking that idea of what can I do, what makes me laugh, what makes me fun. Like I can always, I think every writer probably starts wanting to be deep, dark, and serious, and then we come to what we actually are good at, and that's making people laugh. Hopefully, I don't know. As I get older, maybe just me telling dad jokes to people. I don't know. Okay, but that's where I start, and then I start with prototyping because again, you gotta start actually testing what you're doing. Everything sounds great theoretical on paper. You gotta put it in action, and that's why, man, starting from scratch on something just sounds insane to me. Where you can start with just so many tools now and just try them. Like I have like two thoughts in my head, like I said, and one is like something that's totally doable with where we are, and the other is like a little bit more ambitious. But the thing that's totally doable, I'm almost tempted to say, what it would be like just to do something and say, hey, I am just going to make it all out of asset packs and stupid stuff. And that is what's going to drive design choices. And inside of there, I'll play. And that'll be my restriction. Because I like to have restrictions. Like without restrictions, a full whiteboard is like, oh, I don't want the blank page. I want some restrictions. And so maybe that would be a way to give me restrictions and be fun and just be upfront. This is what it's built out of. I mean, because God knows they called the Anacrusis, which is, it's expensive art because every piece has to be handmade. They call it an asset flip, and you're like, oh, gee, whatever, kid. Again, it's $5. Pick it up today. Okay. But so then, like if you're in a bigger company, you have to look at the market and you have to look at market trends and you have to kind of do all of this competitive analysis. But the problem is when you're small, that's just going to wind you up in a knot. Because you shouldn't make something because there's a market opportunity that you're bad at. That's going to not work, right? It's got to be something that's good. And then you just have to accept the limitations of what you're going to do. And like, where does that work? Like, what market analysis should you do? I just don't think you should do market analysis when you're a small dev. I just don't. Because I think that's where you start just designing for somebody else. And once you're designing for somebody else, you're making guesses of what the right choices are. Where if you are designing for you, you know what the right choices are. And then, you play test it and you make sure you find an audience for that. And it's just not singularly you, but you have that purity to it. And I think I also lost that with the Anacrusis was I was being forgiving opening because you should be with the team and not good at rerouting that back into kind of my vision for some of these things. And that's not to say they were bad people or bad designs, but it's just that cohesiveness. I think often I sound like a jerk here, but I think I'm a nicer guy in real life. And sometimes that hurts me, or maybe not as confident. That could be it as well. I don't know, right? It's all a mix of that. Everybody has some of that. And so making sure that comes through. And you have that, like, whatever you're doing is what you're doing and it's from you and it's not some market research and analysis. And like the competition, when we were working on our game, everyone was like, oh, Back 4 Blood is going to be your big competition. I wasn't worried about that because I wasn't. No offense to them. I like Mike. I like those guys. I like those guys. I'm not picking on them. Okay. Don't take that as me slagging on the game, but I knew they would make a type of game and I would be making something different than that. So I was good with that. And then but you have games like Lethal Company all of a sudden grabs the co-op market. You couldn't predict that. You couldn't go that. And that was a great game. They did a bunch of great stuff there, right? And they were doing something entirely new in a way that just really worked, right? And so that hit. And that ends up being competition for 4-player co-op games. Sure. But you're not going to predict that and you're going to celebrate that. Good for them. Good for him. Because it's a single dude. Dude. Jealous. But no, it's good, seriously, right? But you can't predict that. You can't. And when you launch, who knows what's going to happen and what's going to be there. So all you could do is take control of what you can do. And that's, being who you are, what you can do best, and then executing on that. But it's still finding that. There's still that's still a giant space to explore, right? It's not really limited. So there's a lot you can do, which again is why I keep playing with prototypes, and the setback of losing the drive kind of sucked, but it also made me redo something, and now I like something I didn't really like, which is making me think things. I can be loose in my brain right now. I don't have to be, we need to start doing this and just do it yet. Soon, because I think a lot of times solo devs, why does it take 5 years? And it took 5 years because they weren't disciplined. They weren't excited. They kind of lost enthusiasm. I have this weird thing. Once I start, it's not about losing my enthusiasm for something. Because I can always find something in it. I guess I'm not even really smart. You lose enthusiasm, but I've crunched and worked hard on projects for a long time, so I'm not worried about that. It's just picking the right thing and going, and then you got to just push down those doubts. I don't know, right? But then it becomes a question I have now of how early do you share? Because you are going to pivot, you are going to change, things are going to happen, and I think sometimes a game called Spellbreak. Not to knock the team, Proletariat is a smart team. I forget who they got hired by. They got hired by somebody. But they built this giant Discord. They had all this buzz about it. Oh my God, you could not raise money back then and not hear about how you should do everything, how they were doing it. And I'm just I kind of have disagreements. And not to say I was right, but they pivoted a little bit with that audience, and that audience got mad because it wasn't what they thought they had, and they kind of lost it. And they had a giant Discord, but yet that wasn't enough, and the game ended up, I think it's closed or it's not being updated anymore. And that was at the giant Discord, right? So it's building the audience isn't enough. You have to align that, and you have to make sure that they know what it is. So some people for the Anacrusis will get mad that on the Steam page we mentioned Left 4 Dead. Well, hey, I'm just being honest of where it is. I'm not trying to marketed off the back of that. I just want you to know here's a shorthand for what you're playing. It's this style type of game, right? So I always want people just to know. And so how early can you start sharing where you're yeah, this is what we're making. This is what we're doing. And then giving yourself space inside of there not to be beholden and stuck down lanes where you're pissing people off. I don't know. But yeah, that is where I am and working on this week. And if it seems similar to last week, it kind of is, because it's kind of the reset that happened with the drive failure. Yeah, lesson learned.